Hello, everyone. How you doing today? So it's Kazeem. It's the Tech Talk Show, and today on the show I have Marco Obinu with me, and together with him we're going to be talking how to save money and maximize performance of your workload up on Azure. How are you doing today, Marco?
Fine, Kazeem. Thank you so much for having me here with you. I'm very pleased to join this show.
First of all, let's start with introductions, right? So, who is Marco Obinu? Let my audience learn a little bit about you.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm Marco. I'm an Italian guy. I work in Italy for a Microsoft partner company. I work as an advisory engineer, so basically, I'm a consultant who is involved in designing and implementing the solution that we bring to the customer, mainly related to Azure technologies. I work a lot with Azure and I have a strong passion for it. And I am also an Azure MVP for Microsoft. And I have a strong passion for the data platform also. So my job is to design solutions, to implement them, and to find a way to bring them to the market. So I also have some responsibilities in terms of pre-sales activities and so on. I'm a nerd. I have a strong passion for all technology topics. And recently, in the last few months, I also founded a community here in Genova, where I live, an Azure community for sharing knowledge about the Azure platform, as well as to train new speakers for their journey in public speaking about technology-related contents.
For customers out there who have already migrated to Azure, and for those planning to migrate or considering how they can save money up on Azure. So, what five tips do you have for us today that you would like to share with these people?
Well, I think we can start talking about more than five, let me say, tips. But if I have to choose the top five, I would go with the ones you can see here in the slide. For me, it's really important to define a well-architected solution. Well, you have several ways to achieve similar results in Azure. You can depending on the kind of solution you are developing, you are able to choose different services and achieve similar results, but probably only one of those are different architecture is really efficient in terms of performance, security, costs, and so on. So it's important for you to understand and to be sure that you have a well-architected solution. For this, if you are developing a new solution, a new Azure solution, you can reference the pre-designed architectures that Microsoft shares with the customers to get a well-architected solution from the beginning. On the other side, if you already deploy the solution, you can leverage several instruments that all refers to the well-architected framework from Microsoft to understand if your solution is in line with the best practices. Later, during the demo, I'll show you a tool that allows you for a self-assessment about this topic. Another tips I really consider while designing a solution, an Azure solution, is to use the platform as a service offering whenever it's feasible. I really love Azure Virtual Machines. They are one of my favorite topics because as a nerdy people, I love to talk about IOPS, CPUs, and throughput and so on. But I have to admit that when you have the opportunity to leverage a platform as a service solution, you can also reduce the cost, the overall cost of your solution. Because by leveraging services that allows you for managed governance of the service itself. So you can, for example, let me say you need a database. If you have the opportunity to leverage an Azure SQL database instead of deploying an Azure VM with a SQL Server instance on top of it, then you are gaining automatic updates, automatic backups, automatic tuning, and so on. A lot of stuff that allows you to reduce the hidden costs that are behind the virtual machine. If you try to compare the cost of a PaaS solution with the cost of the equivalent service offered by a single Azure virtual machine, you will find the PaaS service probably a bit more expensive than the single virtual machine. But as soon as you had high availability and hidden costs like backups, maintenance, and so on to the virtual machine, then the PaaS service becomes very, very, very interesting in terms of cost reduction. Then another strong topic I usually suggest to my customer is to apply define a governance strategy of your subscription and of your solutions. You have plenty of tools that allows you to establish a governance workflow, a governance strategy for your workloads. You have the opportunity to tag your resources, and this allows you to have insights about the costs of the single resources, as well as you have the opportunity to define policies that avoid deploying different kind of services. If you have to contain costs of your solution and you wanna avoid that other people that are able to interact with your subscription are able to deploy resources that are too expensive for you, you can leverage Azure policies to block that kind of resources and so on. Another way for you to optimize your costs is to leverage Azure native features like, for example, hybrid benefit. The Azure hybrid benefit is a way for you to reuse your existing on-premises licenses, Windows Server licenses, as well as SQL Server licenses, for example, and to reuse those existing licenses on Azure resources. You have to satisfy a couple of requirements, like, for example, having the on-premises licenses covered by software assurance, but then you are able to migrate those licenses from on-prem deployments to cloud deployments. And this concur in lowering the cost of your Azure services. Another strategy to lower the overall cost of your subscription is to leverage a dev and test subscription for your dev and test workloads. In this way, you will be billed only for compute power and for storage and for other, and you won't be paying for example, licenses. This is a way for you to contain the cost of your dev and test environments if your workloads are in line with the requirements for using a dev and test solution. Another way to optimize your cost, well, is to leverage the cloud scalability, for example. The cloud scalability allows you to avoid to size your workloads for handling their peaks. This is a way for you to size your system that is quite different from what you are used to do on premises, because on premises you normally buy a server that needs to last at least 3 to 5 years, and so you have to buy hardware that is able to support the performance of your system for at least 3 to 5 years. In cloud, you don't have this need, because you can simply start small and then scale up your system as their needs are growing. And eventually, you can also apply several kind of configuration to change the size of your environment in a dynamic way. For example, to scale up the environment to handle the peaks, while to scale down it to when the workload is idle. And you can achieve this by leveraging several features, for example, of the Azure virtual machines, that like the bar stability at the virtual machine level, or the bar stability at the disk level, or you can leverage scale sets to scale out your systems horizontally, and so on. You have different ways to achieve this kind of result, and you have good opportunity to automate this kind of settings. Another way for you to reduce the cost, leveraging the scalability and the automation capabilities offered by the cloud, is, for example, to the ability you have to turn on and turn off your workloads depending on the on a schedule. For example, if you have a system that is normally used during the business hours, you can create a solution, an automation solution, for example, with Azure Automation, that turn on or turn off your system when the business day become and after the working hours. Another way for you to save money, if you have to handle a workload that needs to run for years, is to acquire reservations. By buying reservations, you have the opportunity to pre-allocate compute capacity or storage for your needs. You can buy reservation, for example, for virtual machines, and these reservations are also valid for all the managed services that leverage virtual machines under the scenes, like, for example, Azure Databricks. And by buying a reservation, you have the opportunity to reserve the compute capacity for 1 year or for 3 years, and that allows you to gain access to a reduced price list for those kind of resources.
You mentioned Bustable, right? And I also hear Azure Spot Virtual Machine. So you want to throw a bit more light on that? What does Azure Spot Virtual Machine mean? So can you share a little bit more light on it for those who are not so familiar with the term?
For sure. Well, the Azure Spot Virtual Machines are an opportunity for you to spend less while gaining full speed from your virtual machines. Spot virtual machines, Spot instances, are leveraging the unused capacity that is available inside the data center. You can imagine a data center as a huge facility full of servers. Well, not all the capacity is used at the same time, because in the data center always needs to have some free capacity to handle growing workloads or so on, or to manage to handle new customers. And so if you have a workload that is not a tier one workload, that is not a line of business workload, that is something that can be stopped without any particular issue on your side, you can leverage Azure Spot Virtual Machine to handle it. With the Spot Virtual Machine, you can create a virtual machine that is from one of the main distributed virtual machines, the common sizes you are used to deploy in Azure. You have the opportunity to define that that virtual machine will be turned on only if capacity is available in the data center you choose, and you will pay that virtual machine for a fraction of the cost of the corresponding standard virtual machine. Let me say, the normal virtual machine costs 10, then the spot virtual machine will probably cost less than 1 for the same performance tier, for the same exact performance tier. What's the peculiarity of this virtual machine? Well, since it relies on available capacity in the data center, it can be turned off by Microsoft with a 30 seconds alert before if the data center needs the capacity back to support paying customers. So you have this kind of virtual machine, you will pay a few bucks for them, but Microsoft can stop them if the capacity is needed for other workloads, or if the price for the spot virtual machines overcome a limit that you have defined. Let me say, coming back to the previous example, your spot virtual machine cost 1, you may decide that you don't want to spend more than 1.5 for that virtual machine. So the price of the virtual machine is floating during the time, depending on the available capacity of the data center. And if the virtual machine price overcomes your threshold, so your 1.5, then your virtual machine will be evicted by Microsoft up until the price threshold is not satisfied again. When the price goes back to your threshold, you can then turn on it again. So it's a very cheap way to run workloads, but you have to be prepared for these potential issues.
When we create workloads on Azure, we want to ensure that our workload are secure and reliable, and we want to also be sure that they are cost effective. So do you want to give us some hints? How do we tell as administrators now that our workload on Azure are following best practice so that we can be sure that they are reliable and we're saving costs at the same time?
Okay. Well, sure. I can give you some advices that are the common tools I normally use on this area. For example, well, the first place where you have to look for this kind of information is the documentation. As of now, documentation related to Microsoft products like Azure in my opinion, is incredible. Microsoft Learn is a very good point of a source of information for you. And well, in this area, you have the opportunity to leverage the documentation and several tools in Azure to understand this. For the documentation, you need a way to find the right information for you. And a good starting point to me, if you have an already existing architecture and you want to be sure it's in line with the best practices, you can run a self-assessment with the well-architected framework guidelines. I'll show this in a while. And on the other side, from the Azure subscription, you can leverage tools like, for example, Azure Advisor that allows you to gain insights about a whole bunch of different services that can be distributed inside your subscription, and that service it analyzes the metrics collected from those services and determines if you are exposed on different areas like cost optimization, operational excellence, and security, and so on. Those are the same pillar we can try to address with the well-architected framework. Now, let me show you the experience with this tool. I'll try to share my picture. Okay. Now, on this screen, I'm inside the documentation I'm the Microsoft assessment sections where you can run several self-assessments that are related to different Microsoft documentations like the Cloud Adoption Framework and so on. In our scenario, we are interested in the Azure Well-Architected Review self-assessment. By clicking here, we have the opportunity to create a new assessment. Let's name it for the occasion. Okay. You have eventually the opportunity to interconnect this self-assessment with the Azure Advisor tool that allows you to import the findings that the tools offers you from the subscription. But in our scenario, we won't do this right now. And then you can start a self-assessment phase. You have to define what's your target for this self-assessment. We can choose the well-architected core, well-architected review that is related to the core services of your subscription, networking, virtual machines, and so on. You have also different other scenarios. Some one of them is still in preview, and the subset of questions that are asked to you change depending on the scenario you are trying to address. Let's go with the core well-architected review. And now we have to define which one of the 5 pillars that compose the well-architected framework we want to try to address with this self-assessment. Let's stick with the cost one. Then we can choose with the reliability, security, operational excellence, and the performance one. Let's go with the cost one. And now, depending on the workload we are evaluating for this self-assessment, we have to answer to some questions, and we also have a supporting video that give us some instruction about how to answer those questions. Now, let's simulate the worst scenario where we don't handle any one of these points for about modeling cloud costs and about, for example, governance of the budgets and so on. If we choose none of the above, we will be in the worst available scenario where any one of these advices is not addressed. Let's jump to the end. And in the end, when we complete this self-assessment, we will obtain a an overall score of our assessment that in our scenario will be not so good, since we are saying we can't address anything of those advices. As you can see, I choose none of the above in all the questions, so my starting point is a critical level. We have the opportunity to export the assessment result to CSV for reading it better in a better way. But the most important things here is that depending on the score we get here, we receive different recommendations that point us to different sections of the official documentation and allows us to understand why we are not so good for different topics. This is one of the possibility, and if we choose another one, we will probably direct it to docs online, for example. Let me say for this one. And by leveraging this recommendation, we are able to understand what we should implement to improve our score, and then we can repeat the self-assessment until we get a good scoring in this area. Now, this is a way for you to increase your knowledge about how a well-architected solution should appear in your environment. On the other side, if you want a live recommendation about your existing workload, you have the opportunity to leverage the, let me just switch the screen. Okay, you have the opportunity to leverage the Azure Advisor tool you can find in the portal. You can see this legacy, let me say, dashboard that exposes you recommendation for different topics that are the same that are referenced in the well-architected framework, and you also have the opportunity to export those findings as CSV or PDF. But you can also leverage the new way to present this kind of data, that is the advisory score. I'll show you in a while. Let's try the new advisory score. Here, the recommendations are expressed with a percentage value that depict the current status of your subscription. And then you have a recap of all the findings in the different areas like costs, security, reliability, and so on. If we for example, on the security side, we are at a good point. We have to address 5 issues in terms of reliability and so on. Now, let's have a look to the costs recommendation that this tool offers us. For example, in the subscription I was analyzing here, I gave a couple of recommendations related to virtual machines. For example, one of the recommendations tells me that I may buy some reserved instances for a specific kind of virtual machines. And my potential saving for this point is about $250. If I click on the link, I'll be brought in the portal where I can buy the specific kind of reservation the tool is suggesting me. As you can see here, this tool tells me that I can buy a reservation for standard B2S virtual machine. And if I click the link, I switch to the reserved instances page where I can buy the virtual machines directly. In a while, it should load the interface to buy a reservation for a specific kind of virtual machine. So in this way, I can address the first recommendation about virtual machine reservations. On the other side, I also have the opportunity to address the second recommendation that is related to the availability of virtual machines. Now, to address the virtual machine that is underutilized, the system goes through the metrics that are recorded by the virtual machines. It estimated that during the last period of time, the virtual machine was performing not so hard, so it's hardly used, and you can have a look to the metrics recorded for the specific virtual machines. You can see the data, the percentage of CPU usage you had in the last period and you can also change the time frame you are analyzing for this kind of analysis. And if the virtual machine appears as non-used, you can also decide to turn it off directly from the tool. You can choose the other voice in the recommended actions to shut down the virtual machine. And here you can have additional information regarding where the virtual machine is deployed and so on, additional information about its real usage, and you have a button that allows you to shut down the virtual machine. So basically, this tool is a good way to have an overview of your overall deployment and understand if there are some opportunities to you for you to save some monies. Okay. And by leveraging also other parts of the tool, you also have the opportunity, for example, to apply governance features on your subscriptions. For example, by looking at the recommendation in the operational excellence panel, you have the opportunity to turn on some policies that allows you for saving some monies. For example, you can define which are the SKUs, the different SKUs of virtual machines your user are able to deploy inside your into your Azure subscription. By clicking here, you jump into the policy definition, and you have the opportunity to review the policy definition of this allow virtual machine SKU policies, and you also have the opportunity to assign that policy to your subscription. So here you can see the JSON that represent the policy, how it is made. You also have the opportunity to click on the assign button and follow a wizard to define how your policy should behave on your environment. In a while, I click on assign, and you can see how it should work. By clicking on assign, you jump into another blade of the portal. You have the opportunity to set up the scope for this policy, as well as to add a description. And then in the parameters blade, you have the opportunity to define which kind of different SKUs your users are allowed to deploy inside the subscription. You can tick all the SKUs you want, and then your users won't be able to deploy, for example, virtual machines that are too expensive for your budgets, and so on. This is one of the solutions you can implement to govern your subscription, your resource groups, your management groups at different scope. You can apply these kind of policies to trying to keep your costs as low as possible. Okay, I think that's all for the demo.
Thank you so much for the walkthrough for the demo. I also like the fact that with the Azure Advisor you get those recommendations and you're able to also implement those recommendations. So that's really very nice.
You're welcome. Well, it's a very interesting tool. You still need to apply some thoughts about the recommendation, because sometimes you may find some false positive, or you may find a recommendation that requires additional thinking, because maybe they can be addressed in a different way from the recommendation themselves. But it's a very good starting point to get a spotlight on the aspects you can work on to reduce your overall costs or increase the manageability of your Azure subscription.
So because of time, I think we're just going to wrap up now. Is there any last words from you, Marco, before we say bye-bye now?
Well, to me, it was a pleasure to share this time with you, and thank you so much for having me here. And go and learn on Microsoft Learn and improve your knowledge about the platform, because I think it's really wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you very much once again, Marco, for your time on the show with me today. So this is where we call it a close, and that's what we have for you today on the show. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. And if you like this video, please smash the like button, and I'll see you in the next one.